Men's basketball comes up short against Oklahoma State. Women's basketball falls at home to West Virginia. And we take an inside look into the Bucks versus Chiefs matchup in Super Bowl 55. All this and more coming up on College Press Box. Good evening and welcome to College Press Box. I'm your host, Hannah Burbank. We have a packed show for you all tonight, so let's get right into it with some men's basketball. Texas battled against Oklahoma State on Saturday night, but despite double overtime, the Longhorns could not pull out a win over the Cowboys. Let's check out the highlights. Starting in the first half, Matt Coleman dribbles in and finds Jericho Sims, who dunks it right over OK State players. Then the Cowboys bring it down where Caleb Boone puts up a nice easy shot for two. Then we have a little bit of a loose ball, but the Cowboys recover it, and Chris Harris pulls up for a three at the top. But Coleman doesn't let that slide for Texas, and he goes in for a nice jumper to get the Longhorns some points. It's a back and forth game, and Bryce Williams drives in and puts one up for the Cowboys to end the first. Moving on to the second half, Coleman dribbles in and floats one just over the top for Texas. Coleman then attacks again, comes down and goes right outside to Cunningham, gets it back up top and finds Brown, who then goes inside to Cunningham, finally to Ramey, who puts it up for a layup. Beautiful ball movement from the Longhorns. Then on the counter, they find Andrew Jones for a nice easy layup to give the Longhorns a 46-44 lead. But the Cowboys fight back with Harris finding an easy path to the basket. It's all tied up, but Ramey says not for long and sinks a beautiful three-pointer to give Texas the lead. But the Cowboys find Harris in the corner, who fakes, then sends a three right over the Longhorns defense, sending the game into overtime, where Caleb Boone comes out and throws down a dunk for the Cowboys. And they keep on the pressure with Anderson dribbling in and tossing it up for two, and that is the eventual ball game. Oklahoma State defeats Texas 75-67. A tough loss for the Longhorns. Now I want to welcome our basketball analyst, Jason Kinander, onto the show. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. The Longhorns started the season out strong, beating top-ranked teams like Kansas, UNC, and West Virginia, but they're now on a three-game losing streak. Are the Longhorn struggles a product of their schedule or peaking at the wrong time?
Well, I think it's both. I think that you can make an argument that this Texas team played a number of very good teams at the right time. They played Kansas before Kansas fell off. They played North Carolina before they fell off, West Virginia right before they started to go on a little bit of a skid. But at the same time, this is a team that's coming off of a stretch of games that included Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and sandwiched in between that was a COVID outbreak, which has certainly felt the effects in the Oklahoma game. No Shaka Smart, no Courtney Ramey, no Jericho Sims. Since his return, Courtney Ramey hasn't looked the same. Sims has been a little slow. So COVID has certainly affected the team, but at the same time, it's just another tough stretch of the schedule. And there's a reason why champions aren't crowned in November and December. And as good as the Longhorns looked then, the real test for this team with so much leadership and experience and talent, would be if they could make it through an entire season playing at a high level. And so far they've shown that they cannot. But it's better that they go through this now than going through this in March. Giving this team a little adversity while there's still time before the conference tournament and the NCAA tournament is certainly a big deal.
Very true. You make a good point. Freshman forward Greg Brown has been an important player for Texas. How can Brown play to his full potential down the stretch?
Well, this is a really, really tough one because I feel like as a Texas community and as Texas basketball fans, we all want Greg Brown to be great. Highest rated recruit in a while, 5-star, headed to the NBA after this year. But the bottom line is Greg Brown simply has not been very good. And at times he has definitely hurt the team. It's not necessarily a talent or a game knowledge problem. It's just the simple mistakes that Brown makes game in and game out, whether it be offensive basket interference, which we've seen happen 2 times in 3 games, the technical foul against Baylor after the poster dunk. These are what can be labeled as freshman mistakes, but on a team where he is the only freshman, they're amplified. So I think that one fix that could make Greg Brown be the contributor that we all expected him to be is if he were to be moved to the bench, because what we see with Greg's game is he'll come in, he'll start, and he'll pick up 2 quick fouls, and it affects his game for the rest of the 40 minutes. He's a very aggressive, hard-nosed basketball player that loves to put his entire body out there. But when you have 2 fouls so early, which seems to happen so frequently, it totally throws off his game and really the entire rotation for Texas. So by bringing him off the bench, there would be less of an emphasis on him playing safe, so to speak. And you can focus more on playing within himself and playing the brand of basketball that he thrives in, which is an aggressive style of throwing himself out there and having huge dunks and playing physical. And sometimes that results in fouls, but they're just not as disruptive as if they were to come off the bench. So that's how I think Greg Brown can pick it up. Obviously, he's an amazing talent. He will figure it out. We just hope that he figures it out while he's in college with Texas, because if Greg Brown were to be able to put it together and put an end to this little cold streak, I think that this Texas team, there is no ceiling for them.
Well said. I completely agree with you. Texas struggles to close out games against those tougher opponents. Is this an ominous sign for their performance in March?
Well, as of right now, I'd say no. Mentioned after the first question that this is just a tough stretch of the schedule. And especially with the COVID problems, the Oklahoma game, Texas had 8 available players. So guys like Matt Coleman and Kai Jones and Royce Hamm and Brock Cunningham are getting more run than they normally would. And even though these players are seniors and upperclassmen and bring leadership, they're human beings as well. They are going to get tired. They are going to get fatigued. So I would say that struggling to close out games against tough opponents, it's fixable. The reason why these games have been close and why for the majority of these games Texas has not been able to pull them out is, one, free throw shooting. The free throw shooting needs to get better. In the Baylor game, we saw a stretch where between Greg Brown and Jericho Sims, 5 out of 6 free throws were missed in a row, which is completely unacceptable. And obviously the Baylor game wasn't exactly close, but it totally changed the momentum in the game. So the free throw shooting needs to improve. And secondly, this team has sort of a habit of slowing down or easing up a little bit towards the end of both halves. We saw it against Oklahoma State. Going into the under 8 timeout, they were up 6. Going into halftime, they were down 8. This is a team that is not very well suited to pace themselves throughout a game because they play with such a high level of energy on both sides of the floor. So I'm not saying that they should go a little bit less hard at the start of halves, but they need to do a better job of spreading out the usage of their energy. And obviously the free throw shooting, this is stuff that just comes with practice. And the day before the Baylor game was the first practice that the entire team had together in 18 days because of COVID. So losing and going on this little skid, and none of these are bad losses, but they're all close losses with the exception of the Baylor game. And most of these games could have easily been won. So I don't think that it's time to panic. I don't think it's ominous for March. But like I've said earlier, I'm just glad that this is happening now because this team has the potential to go very, very far. But let's hope that the team we get in March is the team we saw in November and not the team that we're seeing now.
You're right about that. Well, thank you for talking with us, Jason. When we come back, we will be joined by our women's basketball analyst, Daniel Shih, to recap Texas's tough loss to West Virginia. Stick around. Welcome back to College Press Box. Thank you for tuning in. This past Saturday, women's basketball fell 81-75 against West Virginia while playing at the Frank Erwin Center. The Mountaineers came out strong, grabbing an 18-11 lead after the first quarter, but junior Charlie Collier brought the momentum to the Longhorns, scoring 13 points and blocking 2 shots, boosting Texas to a 1-point lead, 40-39 going into the second half. It was a back and forth game throughout the night, but Texas could just not hold on. Over the last 5 minutes of the game, West Virginia outscored Texas 11-6 and ran away with the 81-75 win over the Longhorns. Here to recap the game for us is Daniel Shih. Daniel, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Good to be back on Press Box.
Well, it's good to have you. It was a hard-fought game on Saturday between the two teams. Did Texas just have a bad game, or was West Virginia really that good?
Well, first of all, you have to give credits to West Virginia. They're a really good team. They were ranked coming in, and they were a better team on the court. They shot 53% off on the field, and that's better than 45% that Texas shot. They also out-rebounded Texas 39-29. And again, Texas was hosting this game, and West Virginia came all the way from Morgantown and outperformed Texas. That being said, Texas left a lot of points on the board. They had zero fast break points in the entire game. I haven't seen a team scoring zero fast break points on the stat sheet in a very long time. And I can still, off the top of my head, I can remember them having 2 or 3 opportunities, probably either a free lane or a 3-on-1 opportunity where they just couldn't finish. And that's about 4 to 6 points. And why are they important? Because Texas lost by 6 points. And when you took those points back, who knows who wins this game? And I haven't even mentioned the 8 free throws that Texas missed throughout the game. So when you add all the mishaps up and all the mistakes, all the small mistakes that Texas should not have committed, this could have been Texas's game. So on the one hand, you have to credit to West Virginia. They were a really good team. They outperformed Texas, but Texas could have easily stolen the game if not for a couple of mistakes.
Well, you're right. In close games, every points count and matter. Texas is currently 7-4 in the Big 12 with their next 2 games against Oklahoma State and Baylor, who is currently ranked number 7. Is it time for Texas to hit that panic button yet?
Yes, it's time to hit the panic button. And for the reason I think it will surprise a lot of people. I'm going to start with my argument with this. This team reminds me of Mobamba's 2017 to 2018 men's basketball team. They have a very talented post player in the paint. Mobamba in 2017, in this case, Charlie Collier. They have talented at the wing. Back in 2017, Coleman, Corinne Roach, and Andrew Jones for early part of the season. This year in women's side is Celeste Taylor, John Allen Taylor, and Kiara Lambert. So both teams are very similar on the court, but this team still relies heavily upon Charlie Collier, and she had disappeared late in the games or in critical parts of the game in the last couple of matchups, and that's a huge red flag to me. Remember, in the West Virginia game, in the last 17 minutes, so that's the majority of the second half, Charlie Collier scored 1 point, had 1 assist and 2 rebounds. Again, we're talking about one of the best players in the country, one of the top draft prospects, and for the 2021 WNBA draft. And if you're a player of this caliber, you can't be a non-factor being at home against a very good ranked West Virginia team that could have been a statement win for this program. But as the leader of this team, I just didn't see him on the court. I couldn't find her on the court. And understand sometimes when you're a post player, you don't have the ball a ton. You have to get past the ball. Somebody had to pass you the ball. But as a very talented core player of this program, being touted as one of the top draft prospects, I expected more from Charlie Collier, especially later in the game, and she just didn't show up, and that became a trend more than an outlier in the last couple of games. So that's the one big red flag that would make me push the panic button.
Yep, you're right. Well, things are going to have to start clicking into place for this team and Collier. That being said, Texas has 6 games left in their regular season play. The Longhorns sit in the middle of the pack in the Big 12 right now. What are some realistic expectations for the rest of the season?
Well, you mentioned that Texas is playing Baylor in the not so long future. First of all, let's get this out of the way. Texas is not beating Baylor this year. They have 2 games against the Lady Bears, probably 1 more in the conference tournament, but I don't see them beating Baylor at all. I've covered my fair share of Baylor games in the last couple of years. They're too deep. They're way too talented, and Kim Mulkey will find a way to contain Charlie Collier. So I don't see Texas beating Baylor this year. That being said, Texas, I think they're around the 3rd or 4th best team in the Big 12. I would put West Virginia above Texas right now. You can make an argument that Oklahoma State is better than Texas. Yes, Texas swept Iowa State in the conference schedule, but they're not a team to mess around. So around a 3rd or 4th best team, Texas is definitely in the hunt for that number 2 or number 3 spot in the Big 12. But they really need a strong conference tournament appearance. They need a strong performance in that tournament. I think a semifinal appearance of that tournament will be enough for Texas to secure a good seed in the NCAA tournament. Are they a top 16 seed nationally? No. So I think they're a 4 or 5 seed in a conference. I think that's a realistic expectation for this team. They probably, I don't see them returning to Sweet 16 either. It's first year under a new coach. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That being said, again, this is one thing going for Texas this year is that all of the NCAA tournament games for the women's basketball side will be around the Austin and San Antonio area. I don't think they will be playing in the Frank Erwin Center if they're not a top 2 seed in the region, but it's a virtual home tournament for the Texas Longhorns. They're going to sleep in their own bed. They don't have to travel all the way across the country in order to play in this tournament. So that's the one thing I'll give Texas a little bit of a hope for a surprising run in the tournament. But I think a first or second round exit should be in the mind for a lot of Texas fans, especially the women's basketball fans.
Well, it will be an interesting next couple of weeks. Thank you, Daniel, so much for joining us. And don't go anywhere, because when we come back, Adam Ogburn and Sydney Johnson will give us an inside look into the Super Bowl showdown between the Bucs and the Chiefs. So that the biggest game of the year happened this weekend with Tom Brady facing off against Patrick Mahomes. It was a beatdown by the Buccaneers. The defending Super Bowl champs lost 31-9 against Tampa Bay. Here to recap the big game for us is Adam Ogburn and Sydney Johnson. Thank you both for being here. Now let's get into it. What are y'all's thoughts on this year's Super Bowl?
Yeah, so Tampa Bay, as you said, and Kansas City Chiefs squared off in Tampa Bay for the Super Bowl 55 on Sunday. Let's take a look at the highlights. The running game enabled both of these teams to get past their slow starts and into the flow of the game. But here we have what would become the story of the night, with Mahomes under pressure as he is forced to extend the play with his legs, sends this ball over in the direction of Tyreek Hill, could not pull it in. That drive would end in a field goal. Costly penalties by the Kansas City defense gave Tampa Bay good field position. Brady drops back, dishes that to Antonio Brown. After a pass underneath to tight end Cameron Brate, good blocking downfield, he picks up a good gain. In addition to this, a great run by Leonard Fournette. He's able to bounce this play out to the right side, picks up another first down. And fittingly, Tampa Bay capped this drive off with a Tom Brady to Rob Gronkowski touchdown pass. As we get into the second quarter, the little success from the Chiefs offense, another costly defensive penalty and a 25-yard pass to Mike Evans get the Bucs down inside the 5-yard line, but Kansas City defense gets a great stop at the goal line on fourth down, handing the ball back to their offense. It seemed like a great chance for Kansas City to swing some momentum their way, but a quickly collapsing pocket and drop passes by the Chiefs receivers ended in a punt from their own end zone. Tampa Bay would start this drive in Kansas City territory, and 2 penalties turned this drive from what would have been a field goal into another touchdown. A couple passes to Travis Kelce got the Chiefs another field goal before half and gave the ball back to the Bucs with a minute to go. Again, defensive penalties, as you see here with defensive pass interference, hand the Bucs another touchdown, bringing the score 21-6, Tampa lead at halftime.
Yeah, and heading into the second half, the Chiefs would open the second half with a field goal, but the Bucs would strike right back. Leonard Fournette breaking free for a 27-yard touchdown run midway through the third quarter to extend the Bucs lead. And it didn't get any better for the Chiefs. Mahomes under pressure. He's going to throw one up. It's going to get batted into the air and picked off by Antoine Winfield Jr. And yet again, Mahomes, he just could not get anything going as he was continually under pressure, again running for his life. How about this throw? But Darrell Williams can't come down with it. It hits him in the helmet, incomplete. And then for good measure, again, the Bucs defense, Mahomes looking for a late consolation, but Devin White comes up with a pick as the Buccaneers defense dominates for a 31-9 victory. Tom Brady taking home his 7th Super Bowl. Sydney, it was a dominating performance from the Bucs, but the Chiefs struggled offensively. They didn't score a touchdown in this game. Why do you think that was the case?
Well, the downfall for the Kansas City Chiefs was their severely depleted offensive line. Only having one starter remaining from the beginning of the season is going to be hard for any team to manage, let alone the dominant Bucs defense that has so many weapons as well as the defensive mastermind Todd Bowles as your coordinator. That's a really hard combination to overcome, and it proved to be too much even for the high-powered offense of the Kansas City Chiefs. Looking to the game as a whole, Adam, what was the turning point for you during this game?
Yes, and you look at this was a close game coming down the stretch in the second quarter, but it's this play right here, 20 seconds left, Tom Brady taking a shot down the field, and Mike Evans gets interfered with by Rashad Breeland. It's a very tight penalty. You can see their heels click accidentally. There's an argument to be maybe in the Super Bowl, just let them play, but that is a huge blow. It's a 34-yard penalty. It gave the Bucs a first down at the Kansas City 24, and that led to a Rob Gronkowski touchdown that suddenly turns a 14-6 advantage into a 21-6 advantage. And with the Chiefs starting with the ball in the second half, that difference from a one-possession game to a two-possession game makes a world of difference.
Besides Super Bowl MVP Tom Brady, who was the player that really stood out to you during this game?
Yes, Sydney, you mentioned in the highlights that one drive fittingly ended with it in a touchdown to this player. It was Rob Gronkowski. He comes out of retirement this year, and what a decision that proved to be. He had 45 catches for 623 yards in the regular season. He was a regular contributor, and he showed up in the Super Bowl. 6 catches for 67 yards and these 2 crucial touchdowns in the first half that helped grow the Bucs lead. And in a league where there only are a few elite tight ends, Gronkowski certainly proved his standing among the best with his performance last night. But Sydney, for you, who was a player to you that really stood out last night?
Well, for me, it was easily Jason Pierre-Paul. As I already discussed, that Bucs defense was just absolutely dominant. He was key in putting pressure on Mahomes and not allowing that offense to get into any kind of rhythm. A couple of years ago, after his unfortunate firework accident, there was tons of talk about whether he would be able to return to his dominance that he once had with the Giants. Last night, he proved that he is still one of the most talented defensive players in the league and an integral part of that Bucs defense.
Well, we were watching history be made with Tom Brady winning his 7th Super Bowl. What a night for him and the Buccaneers. Thank you both so much for your insights. Coming up after the break, we will take it back to Austin for some Longhorn sports. Welcome back in. Moving now to Dish Falk Field, Texas baseball is getting ready to kick off their season next week in Arlington in the State Farm Classic. Number 9 ranked Texas will have a tough lineup for the weekend, taking on number 7 Mississippi State, number 8 Arkansas, and number 6 Ole Miss before the Longhorns return home on February 24th to play BYU. And Texas softball ranked number 6 gears up for the start of their season this week. The Longhorns will have a challenging 52-game regular season where Texas will play 23 games against 10 currently ranked opponents. Their season begins at home against number 3 Arizona. And Texas women's tennis dropped a heartbreaker to number 1 ranked North Carolina this past Sunday in the ITA National Team Indoor Championship. This was the first time since 2006 that the Longhorns made an appearance in the championship match, but the Tar Heels secured a 4-3 victory over the Longhorns to win them the title. And Texas men's tennis had a good weekend with a clean sweep in their doubleheader against the University of Incarnate Word and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. After the Longhorns won the doubles match against the Islanders, they continued the dominant play, racking up singles wins by freshmen Leighton Allen and Micah Braswell and sophomores Elliott Spazieri and Cleve Harper. Moving now to track and field, Texas competed in the Charlie Thomas Invitational this past weekend in College Station. The Longhorns shined, winning 12 events overall, and senior thrower Trip Pippery broke the UT indoor shot put record where he launched a throw of 71 feet and 4 inches. And this was the first time in Pippery's career that he broke the 70-foot mark. And finally, coming up this week in Longhorn sports, men's basketball will hit the road to take on Kansas State on Tuesday night at 7. Women's basketball will face off against Oklahoma State on Wednesday night at the Frank Irwin Center. And finally, softball season begins next Thursday at home with the Longhorns hosting their annual Texas Classic. That wraps up our show for tonight. Be sure to tune into College Crossfire on Wednesday nights at 9 and the 1-0 Sports Show on Friday mornings at 10. From all of us here in our virtual studio, we want to thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Hannah Burbank. Have a great night.